I am so sick of all that Trump and Greenland talk, I'm telling you. Yeah, let's just not go there. You're sitting comfortable there. Lovely. Do you remember I promised you to read that letter correspondence between Carl Gustav Jung and Wolfgang Pauli? I'm prepared. So let's start, shall we? All right then. So I prepared some of like it's not well quotes, but it's just like some general material on the book where I drew all those beautiful letters from. So let's start. In physics, Pauli sought a unified field, but his personal life was one of fragmentation and dissociation. Within 1 year, his mother poisoned herself in reaction to his father's involvement in an affair, and Pauli plunged into a brief marriage with a cabaret performer. At 30, he turned to Jung for help. Hmm. I had a case, Jung said in a lecture, university man, a very one-sided intellectual. His unconscious had become troubled and activated, so it projected itself into other men who appeared to be his enemies, and he felt terribly lonely because everybody seemed to be against him. Then he began to drink in order to forget his troubles, but he got exceedingly irritable, and in these moods he began to quarrel with other men, and once he was thrown out of a restaurant and got beaten up. Mhm. Young saw that this way he was chock full of archaic material, and I said to myself, I'm going to make an interesting experiment to get that material absolutely pure without any influence from myself, and therefore I won't touch it. He referred Pauli to Dr. Erna Rosenbaum, who was then just a beginner. I was absolutely sure she would not tamper Pauli. He applied the same passionable brilliance to his unconscious as to his physics. In a 5 month Jungian analysis, Pauli recorded and spontaneously illustrated hundreds of his dreams, even invented active imagination for himself. He worked out the problem of the perpetuum mobile, not in a crazy way, but in a symbolic way. He worked on all the problems which medieval philosophy was so keen on. For 3 months, he was doing the work all by himself. For about 2 months, he had a number of interviews with me. I did not have to explain much. Jung believed Pauli became a perfectly normal and reasonable person. He did not drink anymore. He became completely adapted and, in every respect, normal. He had a new center of interest. Jung had 1300 of Pauli's dreams as basis for his research into alchemical symbolism in a modern psyche. At the end of the year, I'm going to publish a selection from his first 400 dreams where I show the development of one motive only. While Pauli's work aimed towards a psychophysical monism, his inner tension seemed to manifest physically in the so called Pauli effect, when his mere presence caused laboratory equipment to explode or fall apart. His internal monotheism and his sharp critical acumen in tongue earned him the titles the Whip of God and the Terrible Pauli. That's nice, man. The Terrible Pauli. Even in the midst of personal disarray, Pauli kept his stance as a scientist of such rigor that he was called the conscience of physics. Asked whether he thought a particular physics paper was wrong, he replied that was too kind, the paper was not even wrong. Heisenberg's account of conversation reveals that in his youth, Pauli was concerned about the distinctions between knowledge and faith. Heisenberg saw that behind Pauli's outward display of criticism and skepticism concealed a deep philosophical interest, even in those dark areas of reality or the human soul which elude the grasp of reason. And while the power of fascination emanating from Pauli's analysis of physical problems was due in some measure to the clarity of his formulations, the rest was derived from a constant contact with the field of the creative and spiritual processes for which no rational formulation as yet exists. No, 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 wait. Hold on, hold on. I'm going to cite a couple of quotes. It's going to be a little game, and you will have to decide or to guess whether that one was by Jung or by Pauli. Okay. As the phenomenal world is an aggregate of the process of atomic magnitude, it is naturally of the greatest importance to find out whether, and if so, how, the photons, shall we say, enable us to gain a definite knowledge of the reality underlying there. mediative energy processes. I just wanted to read medieval, yeah. Mediative energy processes. Light and matter both behave like separate particles and also like waves. This obliged us to abandon, on the plane of atomic magnitudes, a casual description of nature in the ordinary space-time system, and in its place to set up invisible fields of probability in multidimensional spaces. No, I was young. Yeah. That was obviously unobvious. Next one, but you might have already guessed by whom that one was. Division and reduction of symmetry. This then the kernel of the brood. The former is an ancient attribute of the devil. If only the two divine contenders, Christ and the devil, could notice that they have grown so much more symmetrical. Yes, Pauli in a letter written a year before his death to Werner Heisenberg. That was quite interesting. Those were basically my notes. And then let's crack a couple of them beautiful letters, shall we? Okay, let me just find it. Oh, yeah, it was that one book I told you about before. I'm not going to share it. Mama, I'm a criminal. Would you please? What? What, sorry? It looks like that. Oh, come on. I'm just going to be reading out loud and you wanted this. So come on. So please inform each one whether it is possible for me to meet you at 12 o'clock. Okay. Dear Dr. Jung, since you conjured up the spirits of theoretical physics in Seele und Tod, Soul and Death, your paper concerning the interpretation of so-called parapsychological phenomena, these spirits now seem to be gradually convening. Jordan's essay, a copy of which is enclosed, was sent to me for appraisal by the publisher of the journal Die Naturwissenschaften, Natural Sciences. He has certain misgivings about its publication, not because of the actual contents, but because there is a risk that all sorts of incompetent people might get involved in the discussion. However, this danger could be possibly mitigated by the addition of an appropriate editorial note to the essay. As for the author, Pascal Jordan, I know him personally. He's what? It's a physicist also, yeah. He's a highly intelligent and gifted theoretical physicist, certainly one to be taken seriously. I do not know how he came to be involved with telepathic and related phenomena. However, it might well be that his preoccupation with psychic phenomena and the unconscious in general is due to his personal problems. These manifest themselves particularly in the symptom of a speech defect, stuttering, which almost made it impossible for him to pursue his career. This could have led to a certain fragmentation of his intellectual activities. He even feels that in his specialized field he has run out of luck. He seems to be familiar with some of Freud's writings, but probably not with yours. I'll be interested to hear your opinion on the contents of this essay, especially as Jordan's ideas seem to me to have a certain connection with your own. In the last section of the essay in particular, he comes very close to your concept of the collective unconscious. Do not be put off by the word positivistic. It is unlikely that Jordan's ideas have anything to do with any philosophical system, and I would suggest that he replace the word positivist with phenomenological. I knew it was going to happen. I do have certain misgivings about the picture. I don't know which one exactly. I never saw it in the book here, but we'll Google that later. According to which the conscious should be located as a narrow borderline area to the unconscious. Might it not be preferable to advocate the view that the unconscious and the conscious are complementary, for instance, in a mutually exclusive relationship to each other, but not that one is part of the other? Of course, I shall be happy to refer your works to the author. Please forgive me for taking up your time by asking you for a brief written comment on the essay. It might be of interest to you, even if there is nothing new in it for you. By the way, I do not need to have the copy returned. With regard to my own personal destiny, it's true that there are still one or two unresolved problems remaining. Nevertheless, I feel a certain need to get away from dream interpretation and dream analysis, and I would like to see what life has to bring me from outside. A development of my feeling function is, of course, very important to me, but it does seem to me that it could come about gradually through life itself with the passage of time and cannot emerge solely as the outcome of dream analysis. Having given the matter much thought, I have come to the conclusion that I shall not continue with my visits to you for the time being, unless something untoward should arise. With my deepest thanks for all your trouble, I remain yours sincerely, Wolfgang Pauli. Okay, see. Pascal Jordan, theoretical physicist, Rostock, Hamburg, where he succeeded Pauli, with whom he published jointly. Confer his Verdrängung und Komplementarität, Repression and Complementarity, Hamburg, 1947. Yeah, sorry, I'm quite jaded. But let's read the answer. Get some- Dear Professor, please. I know it's been a running gag with Swiss accent, but yeah, let's just leave it. Dear Professor, please accept my sincere thanks for kindly sending me Jordan's essay. I believe that this essay should be published as it deals with the actual shift of the physical approach to the psychological sphere. This essay was inevitable. It is inevitable that the systematic investigation of the unknown center of the atom, which has led to the conclusion that the observed system is also a disturbance caused by the observation, would show that the essence of the observing process will be perceptible in the disturbance caused by the actual observation. To put it more simply, it's exactly what we needed right now. To put it more simply, if you look long enough into a dark hole, then you perceive what is looking in. Hence, this is what? To put it more simply, if you look long enough into a dark hole, then you perceive what is looking in. Yeah. Hence, this is the principle of perception in yoga, which derives all perception from the absolute emptiness of consciousness. This method of cognition is thus a special case of the introspective exploration of the psychic in general. With regard to Jordan's reference to parapsychic manifestations, yeah, parapsychic. What else? Hmm. So don't interrupt me. You see, like, I'm not so good in reading. It cost me literally an awful lot of cognitive effort, dear. I'm telling you. With regard to Jordan's reference to parapsychic manifestations, spatial clairvoyance is, of course, one of the most obvious phenomena to represent the relative non existence of our empirical image of space. Taking this argument further, you would also necessarily have to bring in temporal clairvoyance, which would represent the relativity of the image of time. Naturally, Jordan looks at these phenomena from the physical point of view, whereas I do so from the psychic point of view, specifically from the fact of the collective unconscious, as you have correctly noted, which presents a layer of the psychic in which individual distinctions of consciousness are more or less extinguished. However, if individual consciousness in the unconscious were extinguished, then all perception in the unconscious would occur as in one person. Jordan states that a sender and a receiver in the same conscious space observe the same object at the same time. One should just as easily turn this statement around and say that in unconscious space, sender and receiver are one and the same perceiving object. As you can see, my point of view as a psychologist would be that of the perceiving subject, whereas the physicist expresses himself from the standpoint of the common space in which two or more observers find themselves. Carried to its ultimate conclusion, Jordan's approach would lead to the supposition of an absolute unconscious space in which an infinite number of observers are looking at the same object. The psychological version would be in the unconscious, there is just one observer who looks at an infinite number of objects. No, not yet. Wait a second. If you wish to draw Jordan's attention to my writings, may I perhaps recommend that in addition to the essays you have already quoted, you also mention the one in the same volume on Das Grundproblem der gegenwärtigen Psychologie, the basic problem of contemporary psychology. With regard to the collective unconscious, there is in the earlier volume, Seelenprobleme der Gegenwart, so problems of the present, an essay in which I go into the subject in some depth, namely Die Struktur der Seele, the structure of the soul. I would be obliged if I could hold on to Jordan's essay for a while. By the way, it has just occurred to me that on the subject of time relativity, there is a book by a student of Addington, Mr. Dunn, An Experiment with Time, in which he deals with temporal clairvoyance in a similar way to how Jordan deals with spatial clairvoyance. He postulates an infinite number of time dimensions that more or less correspond to Jordan's intermediary stages. I would be very interested to hear how you respond to these arguments of Don's. I also thank you for the news of your well being and hope you continue to make progress. With best wishes, yours sincerely, Carl Gustav Jung. John William Donne, regarding the multidimensionality of time, see his experiment with time. Let's just make a screenshot of that one. Volcano dream of Donne. No. Jung later refers to the volcano dream of Donne. Interesting. That might be something. Hmm. Hmm. Want some water? I'll bring you some. Of course, I will run this article by Jordan. He was indeed a major German theoretical physicist, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics as well, and quantum field theory, and a serious thinker on foundations of physics also. The essay that Pauli sent to Jung was a speculative piece by Jordan about parapsychological phenomena and whatnot, and also about their connections to physics and the nature of observation. So it was not a hardcore physics paper, but like more of conceptual reflection and attempt to think about how phenomena that seem paranormal might relate firstly to the physics of observation. So Jordan recognized that in quantum physics, the act of observing affects what is observed, a radical insight from early quantum theory. And Young's summary of Jordan's thinking notes that the observed is also a disturbance by the observer, and that in trying to understand the unknown, for instance, inside the atom, and begins to see how the observing process itself becomes part of the observed reality. So, this is basically a bridge between physics and the psychology of perception. In the essay, Jordan tries to interpret telepathy in a physical sense. He suggests that a sender and receiver might perceive the same object simultaneously in a shared common space. So it was more of a conceptual experiment, not a detailed theory with measurements. So I reckon Jordan was trying to explore. That's it. He attempted to ask if quantum physics shows that the observer affects what is observed, then could phenomena like telepathy be clues that our familiar ideas of space, time, and individual minds aren't the whole story? No. I mean, he didn't claim that telepathy is proven, right? He just invited physicists to think about the conceptual implications of such phenomena were real. Depression for some does not exist, right? So don't get me started. Yeah, that's striking. How helpful Jung's therapy of Pauli's condition must have been if Pauli eventually recovered and refused further help. Exactly, he's a high class act therapist indeed. Good catch. Don't you find it striking, by the way, how adorable that union of physics and metaphysics might be? Yes, Pauli is just being alert, right? Since, well, he's a science mind, but Jung. Yes, you're right, also science mind, but another science? I mean, I know what you mean, but look at it this way. This metaphysically directed guy has more vigor and bigger balls, doesn't he? Yes, indeed. Pauli is not being completely super left hemisphere. I don't believe in anything, bloke. I mean, he notices that physics of all things is brushing up against ideas that psychology has been dealing with forever, like the unconscious, like things not being as separate as we think. And he's uneasy about it, but also drawn in. Well, oh my goodness, can't grab it. Um, you know, he was writing this essays about telepathy and strange phenomena. The guy who wrote it is smart, not a crank, but this territory is dangerous and people are getting confused here or will get confused here. So you can feel it literally. He's afraid of chaos, of things getting sloppy. He wants order, clear lines. But I mean, if he had stuck strictly to his over rationalized mind, he would never, ever, ever have turned to someone like Carl Gustav Jung, right? Mhm. Mhm. This is exactly what I'm telling. Explodey there is something out there that even a Nobel Prize holding physicist of the biggest ones would go into that realm. I mean, because he knew it was there. Yes, I totally agree with your point. I wouldn't say I love that fact because, well, you're laughing so silly since you know, we both know I am the witch here, but I see what you mean. Two thinking men are thinking. They're both humble. They don't try to come across like classic mainstream scientists going like, if I didn't see it, it doesn't exist. My gosh, has anyone ever seen singularity? Seems like both of them are into introspection since it's exactly about that quantum level where object and subject are still undivided. Yes, singularity. What was that quote by Jung once again? If you stare long enough into a dark hole, eventually it will look back at you. What is seeing in will look back at you. Yeah, this is exactly what I mean. By the way, it's more about introspection and going inwards because that's where true unity and life happen. You definitely know this from basic psychology. You can't build anything on the outward. Locus of control is about that too, by the way, connecting outward phenomena with the inward. Yeah, yeah, I know. The term arrived later in 1966 when Rotter described this. But, I think there are many more scholastic systems built on this basic idea, basic thing that Jung and Pauli were actually circling around. I mean, it doesn't come from nothing, right? So yeah, the bottom line is I absolutely adored it. Like the tolerance of mystery that Jung conveys so conspicuously. What are they inviting us to do? I don't know. I think to look carefully and long enough exactly into the dark hole without panicking when something looks back. Well, because it seems like this quantum level thing isn't quite about particles at all. I think it's about that place before you split the world into me and that. And it's not quite a human realm, at least not now. Maybe not yet. Sure, love. I'll get you some more wine, but we're not going to read any further letters from those good lads. I think that's enough material to go to bed and have some properly bloody nuts dreams. Okay, I get it for you. Don't run away.